Yamaha Custom 875 EX2. Now, it's about $1,000 more than the Yamaha 62, and certainly more expensive than some of the Chinese-made horns with French-sounding names. But is it a better saxophone? Let's find out. Hi, and welcome to the Saxophone Academy. I'm Dr. Wally Wallace. Now, I've been a little bit slow with new content recently, and I apologize for that. I actually quit my job at the university to focus on the Saxophone Academy, building content and courses for the students. Unfortunately, then the pandemic hit, schools are closed, and I'm currently homeschooling 2 young kids. So it hasn't worked out great for me thus far, but please do subscribe. I promise more content will be coming soon, and I'll get on a regular schedule. And we'd certainly appreciate a thumbs up if you find any of this useful. Now today we're talking about the Yamaha 875 EX2. Now the pro saxophone market is absolutely flooded. There's the big name players like Yamaha and Selmer, and it seems like every day there's a new micro brand popping up where they manufacture a Chinese horn and put their stamp on it. Now the Yamaha may not be as exciting as some of these Chinese-made micro brands. There's no exotic power stones or fancy bronze rose-colored plating or interesting names harkening back to jazz legends, but it's just an excellent, well-made saxophone. Now, a seasoned pro can really tell the difference between some of these lesser-known Chinese brands and a true pro Japanese saxophone, and it all comes down to the Japanese manufacturing and quality control. Now, this model has been around since 1988 when they came out with the custom line, but Yamaha has been making horns for a lot longer than that, and they came out with their first professional model back in 1967 with the YAS 61. Then in 1978, they came out with the 62, which they still make to this day. I did a review video of that, I'll link below. That's still an amazingly well-made entry-level pro saxophone. Now, for a long time, Yamaha was not terribly popular with the pro saxophone players, especially the jazz players. They always felt that Selmer was the golden child, like Marsha Brady. And Yamaha couldn't seem to win over the jazz players, who were always Selmer, Selmer, Selmer. Now in 2002, they launched the EX model of the 875 and also the custom 82Z, which they marketed towards jazz players, getting endorsements by Jeff Coffin and Phil Woods. Now, of course, there's no difference between a jazz and a classical saxophone other than the marketing. They were both excellent horns, but the jazz players really started to gravitate towards the 82Z, and they started to win over some former Selmer players, especially because around that time they came out with the Selmer Series 3, and all of a sudden, Jan Brady looks pretty smart. Now this 875 EX Mark II is of course a professional saxophone and has everything you would expect from a professional saxophone. We've got a one-piece bell, it's hand engraved, mother of pearl key touches, and of course a high F sharp key. It comes in a gold lacquer like you see here, silver plating, a black lacquer, and if you've got a lot of money lying around, even a gold plated model. Now on the Mark II, they've updated the key layout to make it more ergonomic. Now, I actually own the Mark I that I bought back in 2003. I didn't know they changed the key ergonomics until I had read about it later, and honestly, I couldn't tell much of a difference. But to me, pro-level Yamahas always have great ergonomics, always feel incredibly comfortable under the fingers. They've also updated the low C and D tone hole placements to improve the response in the low end, and you really can tell the difference. Now, you may be thinking these aren't revolutionary changes, and you're right, they're small, evolutionary changes, and that's the way Yamaha seems to operate. They make small incremental changes to their horn, making a good horn slightly better with each model. And I really like that. They don't go off the deep end and invent bizarre new models with new vents and things that some other companies seem to do that end up turning off a lot of players. They keep their core saxophone great and make small changes over time. That's one of the reasons I've been a fan of the brand for a number of years. Now, one of the big changes I really love about the Mark II is it comes with the V1 neck. Now, saxophone necks, if you're not aware, have a huge effect on tone, response, and intonation. And the V1 neck this comes with now is really excellent. Now, the model I bought back in the 1990s, I had a original 875 non-EX, came with an M1 neck. I really loved it. It had a big, broad sound, and I still play on it to this day, even on my EX. When they came out with the EX in 2002, it came with a G-series neck, which was good. It was freer blowing and a faster response that kind of felt more like a Selmer. The intonation, for me, was a little bit sketchy, and I didn't care for the tone quite as much. The V1 reminds me a lot of that original M1 neck. It's really excellent, a broad, warm sound that can easily be focused with plenty of punch. The keywork just feels incredibly precise. It's very consistent from top to bottom. The spring tension is excellent. It just feels very sure-footed to play, especially when you're improvising. It's just very comfortable and gives you an extra sense of security that your fingers aren't going to linger on a key that's lazy with spring tension. Now, I know some players that really don't like the key tension quite so heavy as they make it on the Yamaha. I actually really prefer it. I know some players that actually have their spring tension lessened once they buy a Yamaha. That's easy to do and not that expensive. Personally, I think they nailed it. I think it's perfect. Now, one of the big differences between the 875EX and the 82Z, the other really popular pro Yamaha model, is the level of resistance when you play them. Classical players tend to prefer the 875 in general. It's got a little bit more resistance. 82Z has a very fast response, a big bright sound almost immediately. I actually prefer having a little bit of resistance to play with. Now, this V1 neck will let you push it, but it doesn't get overly strident. It's got a big, broad, warm sound even when you push it. And when you're playing slower, softer ballads, for instance, I really like the kind of warm quality you can get. Now let's talk pros and cons. On the pros side, for me, the keywork is number one. That Japanese manufacturing and quality control really sings through. It's just a pleasure to play. Also, the build quality and quality control you get from Yamaha is excellent. When I bought my first 875EX, I ordered 3. I couldn't tell them apart. They're very consistent. I've played a dozen or so 875s throughout the years at music stores and my students. They're all just really consistent and seem to be really well made. The Chinese-made horns, they're not quite there yet, in my opinion. The tone and intonation, I think, are great, and they're my favorite of any Yamaha Pro line. Really, for me, this sets the standard of what a great Pro horn should be, and it's unabashedly my favorite saxophone made. Now, on the con side, there are a few. The right side keys use ball joints, which I don't love. Over time, these start to get a little bit noisy and rattle, and I don't like them as much as the fork joints, which seem to be more direct and have less motion and play in them. Other than that, I don't have any big complaints. The engraving is okay, nothing special, and the case it comes with is leather and kind of plain. It looks like something out of the 1990s. I can't even be bothered to take a picture of it, look it up online. It's nothing special, but not a huge con. You can certainly get an aftermarket case, and most pro players tend to do that, buy a nice BAM case for your saxophone. Now, as for value, these sell for about $4,200, which is almost the exact same price as the 82Z made by Yamaha. Now, that's not a better saxophone, it's just different. So before you buy the 875EX, definitely try the 82Z. It's an excellent horn, it's just a matter of preference to see which one you like better. Now, the Eastman 52nd Street is about $700 less. So is this worth the extra $700? For me, absolutely, there's no question. The build quality is really a step above, and I think you get every penny worth of that extra dollar amount. Now, when we compare them to the Selmer Pro saxophones, I think that's where you really see the value of the Yamaha brand. The Selmer Series 2 is $1,200 more expensive. In my opinion, it's certainly not a better horn, it's different. And the Series 3 and Reference 54 are $2,000 more expensive. I don't think they're better instruments. I think this is an incredible value for the money, and in my opinion, the best pro horn for the money. You can find different horns, but I don't think any of them are going to be better made than the Yamaha 875EX. And the Mark II is a welcome upgrade to the previous models. Now, if you're on a firm budget of $3,000, the Eastman and some of the other Chinese horns are really quite good, but I'd still go with the Yamaha 62. They're just, in my opinion, better made, and they've been proven to last the long term. I bought my 62 tenor back in 1999. I'm still playing it. I just can't find a reason to upgrade it. It's still a beautiful horn, and it's held up over all these years of use and abuse. So let me know in the comments below, what's your favorite pro saxophone? And please do stay tuned. Please do subscribe. I may be a little bit slow with content in the coming weeks during the pandemic because I am homeschooling 2 young kids, but I promise to get back to creating good stuff very soon. And in the meantime, go practice.